So I just got like my hosting stuff set up. I new hosting stuff, but oh, there's the update. But anyway, I wanted to kind of elaborate on some of what. Oh, let me go back to the right workspace. Um, on some of the gaming setup that I have, and maybe you can add some input to what you might want to hear more about. So I think the first obvious thing that most people are going to use when it comes to Linux gaming, so there are multiplicity of applications, and I think the first obvious one is Steam. So I've actually used a couple of I've actually played a few games through it, a number of games on through it on stream already. So we go to home, you can see that like there's a whole slew of everything. I've done Left 4 Dead on stream, and that's a Windows only game. So it's actually pretty easy to set up. Most distros have it in the repositories. So like we go for if we go and look for our Steam, we've got a shortcut set so it auto appends sudo to it. So like in the Archer Arctics repositories, which back Arctics backs to Arch for some of the stuff that isn't in their repositories or repackaged. But you can see that Steam already shows up there. I believe the same thing is true for Debian, Ubuntu, and the like. You can install it pretty simply. It'll set up itself, and then you can install your games that way. And it really comes pretty much pre-packaged. There might be some tweaking that you might have to do. Like, for example, for My Summer Car, I've played that a couple times already on stream. You can check this force to use specific Steam Play compatibility tool, and you can sift through like the various options that you have. There might be different plugins or things that you can install to add other options for it to Steam so that you can run other games. I can show that off otherwise in a second. But you can see that you can pick a specific version of Proton that's installed or install your own version or use the native Linux one. So it'll run a wine prefix basically and run the game with DXVK and the like for Proton. And that comes prepackaged setup and everything else. You saw Boxtron, and that runs DOSBox instead of like a Wine Proton DOSBox. It'll run the native DOSBox, and you can set it up to point to that. So if I look for where'd it go? In here somewhere. Heretic. You can see that I have Boxtron set up. So when I run Heretic, hopefully this doesn't take as long as the others for some reason. Oh, cool, thank you. So I'm using DOSBox staging, but you can see it runs pretty well already. And that's using the native one, and it'll show up in Steam and integrate somewhat well with that. I think, yeah, see, it does the Steam overlay as well. So, Steam's kind of like your all-around go get big option that way. That's kind of pretty universal. I want to say, does this one work? Can't remember. I think no. This worked at one point. You could wait. No, never mind. It's got a. Why is it? I don't know. Um, it can run some things pretty well. It's give it a second. Come on, buddy. No, not. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, cool. Let's go into properties. Oh, that's probably why. So if we open that with Proton, it should be able to run this game just fine inside of a Proton prefix, so you can run your Windows games and applications that way as well. Should be able to. Oh, well, it did at one point. But, yeah, it's got a whole bunch of native games that you can play in Steam. Some games that won't show up on GOG or the like. So, Steam's kind of the big one that most everyone's familiar with. The next one that I kind of like have used actively is Lutris. So it's a Python GUI front end thing for managing your various different games. Um, they have a website that you can use. And basically, what you do is you come in, you find the game that you want to play or install, and it has install scripts, and it'll like connect to Lutris, like so, and ask you which version to install if it has multiple. Well, if you install it through the GUI here, yes. So if I go and I check, then it'll show all the games in my library, so you can sync it with your Lutris account online. And then let us go for both wine games. Do I have any? I don't think I have any good examples otherwise. Oh, here we go. Okay, so if we go to Arcanum, for example, here, it has multiple versions. So when you install from the GUI like this from your library, you can add games to it on the Lutris site or so on. It'll give you the option there. If you pick a specific install script from the website instead, then it'll only show you the one option. So you can install it multiple ways that way. And Lutris does pretty well. It does come packaged with its own version of Wine now, so it can manage its own, can release a stable version of Wine with each stable Lutris release. And it doesn't have some of the fancy things with like Steam and all, but it does actually do pretty well. Some things may not work perfectly, but you can always go in and if you look at configure, you can actually specifically configure certain things for the game specifically. So like this, I could set it up so it doesn't render on my dedicated GPU if I really wanted to for that game alone. And you can even manage certain runners kind of in the same way and do the same deal. So I can have different settings for Linux as an umbrella and then tweak each individual game as needed. And the same thing with like a Scum VM or whatever. So you can see I've already got one or two games installed, and then there's some of them they'll let you actually run the runner itself as standalone. And they do have Wine Steam as well, so you can play games in Wine Steam and have it configured to do different things that way. So the next one is kind of an interesting one. I don't think it's really had any updates in the main branch for a bit, but it's GameHub. It can sync into your GOG account just like Lutris. It looks at your Steam if you have it locally installed, and you can log into Humble Bundle just like I believe Lutris lets you do that too. So you can have all those games show up in it. So what it'll do is it'll load up your whole library and it'll give you like the top bar here and let you select like sort it like do it all at once, so it'll list all the games that you have basically set up. And so it'll sync with your Steam library. You can look at just the GOG. And what this does is it also manages wine prefixes for you for as needed, but it gives you various options for how you want to run the game. So I can go to, let me pick Wasteland Remastered, so we can go into options, and it'll have that kind of thing for you. So Blood Fresh Supply. So if we click install on this one, we get a couple different options as you can see how we want to install it. So we can use Proton as the runner and install it that way, or we can use straight up InnoExtract to install it, and all it'll do is it'll pull out the files directly from the installer. And it actually works pretty well doing that. So a couple of them that did it that way is like Wasteland, the original, which will run in DOSBox. So if we click run here, some of these will mess things up. Steam is specifically configured such that it doesn't mess with your monitor resolution settings because of the way that they fix things up. So I think I have one of these. Let me not use Supreme Ruler as an example, I think. So if we run Project Warlock, it'll run actually under like a Steam Proton window. So what it does is it basically pretends it's full screen, but it's not. Proton, let's go 513. Oh, and yeah, it does let you add it to Steam as well, so I don't think Lutris quite does that, but this kind of has the auto link and lets you do it that way. So okay. This is half the fun of it, see? You just get to mess around and see what... Oh, there it is. Okay. So yeah, you can see that it does it just fine-ish. So yeah, we just kind of exited out of it. Left it. I just kept hitting escape. But yeah, it kind of does that kind of cool thing. You can add games that are already installed to it and things like that. So yeah, like I said, it connects into Humble, it connects into GOG, and it even does Humble Trove, which is interesting. So let me go back to Lutris. So if we go, which one was it? References? No. Import games. Okay, there it is. So you go to import games, and you'll have this GOG thing come up, and at first it'll ask you to log in, so it'll give you a thing here, and then you can log in, and then you can see that it syncs your whole library up and lets you select which games you want to import to your Lutris.net library so that you can have that readily available. And the functionality also adds it so that it can interface with the GOG download interface and actually automatically download many of the executables for you so that you don't even have to do that yourself and tell it where it's at. You can also... It might be having issues with Humble, but that's okay. You can sync it with Humble as well and log in that way. Then Steam, it kind of uses the local Steam login rather than that, and then it can detect many of the games that are already installed on your system that you've installed otherwise. So you can see, like, I've installed Beneath a Steel Sky and Blade Runner and a couple others through the normal methods rather than through the Lutris method. So it'll detect those desktop files and stuff, and like not all the icons kind of sync up really nicely. But yeah, you can see Doomsday Engine in here. So there are a couple of those. Yeah, Doom 64. So it recognizes some of those libraries, and it'll actually show up automatically in the Linux thing over here. Otherwise, so, for the most part. So those automatically get imported in, but not into your library. Just kind of into the interface itself. It detects what's on the system. one other thing. So this kind of like covers like general PC gaming stuff, but one other thing that there is the retro games. So kind of the big main emulator that I think everyone pretty much uses, and well, the multi emulator that's kind of has the more appeal, especially on PC. It might be simpler to use. I'm not. I mean, it's simpler to use in my opinion. But is Retroarch because it's got the multiple cores, multiple interfaces, and everything else. It's pretty much on everything, including your grandma's toaster. It's got cores for just about everything from Doom to 2048 to like, well, I think even the PS2 and like the Nintendo 64. And it has different emulators that way, all kind of packaged into one. And you can manage your library with it. I've used it on a couple different streams. So you can import your whole library to it. I think I've done a video on working with it that way. So I'll have to look for it and see if I find it. But yeah, that's kind of the big, like, universal, kind of like the simpler option. You can usually install that from any, like, most Linux repos already have it. So you should be able to find that pretty simply. You'll notice that I go back to Lutris. That Lutris and GameHub both have interfaces to interact with Retroarch as well. So you can see Mednothin is in here, which is one such system. But if I go to my Manage Runners, you can see that it's got this whole slew of runners that you can actually install locally without installing it to the whole system. So you can see libretro here. It doesn't use RetroArch directly, but it can act as sort of a libretro front end like RetroArch. You can see like Mupen 64 Plus, MAME, and many others in the Pico 8. So GameHub and Lutris again are really good options for your retro console emulation if you really want to go that far. They've even got the PS3, which is amazing. I wasn't aware of that. I think that's a more recent edition. Just kind of like the Primus run stuff. But, your other option is you basically download the individual emulators yourself or install them yourself so that you don't have to think about it. And, like, you've got the whole gamut of, like, VB8M, which is really popular, not really all that good. Mgba, where'd it go? Right there. Mgba is kind of my recommended Game Boy Advance go-to, and it's really good, really accurate, in active development, and they've done a lot of cool fixes that other emulators didn't quite get around to doing for like the NES Classic stuff. So you could find individual emulators like that, I believe. No, that is... I do not have Gambit installed as a standalone. That's kind of in my scripts folder otherwise. For executables. You've also got, like... Where is it? SNES 9X. And that's a standalone one I've used a couple different times on stream. So, like, if you're strapped for resources and maybe RetroArch can be pretty light, but at the same time, sometimes you just want the standalone emulator, then that's kind of an option. You can look around. There are plenty of areas that'll show you what to look for, and most emulators that have Linux support pretty much tell you what repos they're officially in, or how you can install them to your distro in an alternative fashion. So there are a couple other multi-emulator systems like Hygen and Icarus, I haven't really used them all that much, but I guess they're pretty good. So, yeah, you've got like a whole bunch of systems that can be used that way. But yeah, if you want me to elaborate on anything that way, do let me know and I can do that. Or dive into it and then do it if I am not quite knowledgeable enough on the specific subject. Be sure to check all the links in the description down below. Donate to Subscribe Star and that kind of thing. I will see you in the next one.